Item 4.02, presentation. Brad Segal, founder and president of Progressive Urban Management Associates, P.U.M.A, regarding Global Trends Report.
Thank you, President Wright. Kelly Devine from the Burlington Business Association. The presentation is about 20 minutes long, so if it's the pleasure of the council, we can start that, interrupt it, and then continue.
Let's start it. It's still too early to start the poll.
Okay. So my name is Kelly Devine. I'm the Executive Director of the Burlington Business Association. As councilors may know, we're operating in a partnership with the Department of Public Works, doing a series of parking improvements and also taking an in-depth look at the current state of our downtown improvement district, which involves Public Works because the funding is designated by charter to fund the 2-hour free parking program. And as part of the agreement that came before council last year, authority was given to create a downtown improvement district advisory committee. That group is actively operating. Councilor Roof is on it representing the council, and we have, through a competitive process, procured Brad Segal and his firm P.U.M.A to do an investigation and come forward with some suggestions for next steps for the downtown improvement district. It's been a pleasure working with Brad. Some of you from the council may remember our trip to Denver in 2010. Brad at that time was with the Denver Partnership and ran that group in downtown Denver. He's since gone out on his own into the consulting world and has worked with a long series of cities to help them solve and address these types of questions and problems. Some of them include Boulder, Colorado. We visited there that they're actively working with. Santa Monica, California. Some of you may remember that their executive director came and met with some of us about a little over a year ago. Berkeley, California. Over 75 different cities that they've worked with. So let me introduce Brad Segal, the principal of P.U.M.A.
Great, thank you. And are we struggling to find the presentation back there? All right. Anyway, Council, thank you for inviting me here tonight. I am going to talk about different trends that are shaping cities and how that's going to relate to our work in Burlington. A couple revisions real quickly to the bio too. I've been involved in downtown and community development work for about 30 years, and for 25 years we've been consulting around the country, working in a variety of cities. Our job in Burlington is to look at the improvement districts that we have. You're aware that Church Street and the Downtown Improvement District are both 30 and 20 years old, respectively. And it's a worthwhile exercise from time to time, or within 20 or 30 years, to take a look and see if we have the best tools for what's moving forward. It doesn't look like we have the trends presentation, so I don't know if you're back up to public comment period.
You're still working on the...
There we go.
There we go.
Bingo. All right, this is not a 20-minute presentation. We also have a 10-minute version for you because that's what's on the agenda tonight. So we're going to obey the agenda, walk you through this, and then would love to have comments and questions from council if we trigger it at the appropriate time. So thank you. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to talk about is a body of work that our firm manages about different trends that are shaping cities. And this body of work came from our work in our hometown in Denver. 10 years ago, we were the economists for a downtown plan looking at the next 20 years of our city. And to project ahead, we looked at 10 different trends that are shaping cities actually all over the country. Next slide, please. So this trends exercise, it not only informed our work in Denver, but we found that it also helped us in cities all over the country. And it has since become a bit of a cottage industry for us. So we publish these results, and we'll make that publication as well as these slides available to council and to anyone who's actually watching in the community tonight. This slide simply shows that these trends have changed over time. So the trends that we looked at 10 years ago are not necessarily the trends we look at today. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at, next slide, please. We start with demographics, and there are 4 generations that are really shaping cities and influencing how downtowns are growing. We all know about baby boomers. I am a boomer myself. It looks like I don't have many of you sharing that generational distinction. There are a couple of you. There are several of you. But boomers, we can all be honest in the room. Boomers, though, our sheer numbers really shaped the country, shaped our cities for many, many years, for decades, until the Great Recession. And then of all these generations shaping cities, we were hurt the hardest by this. So a lot of us not only lost home values, but we also lost retirement savings. Before that, as the picture on the slide, that's how it was going to end for us boomers. We were all going to be happy on a beach in love, somewhere. But not so much. And what's happening is we're aging in place, and that's an opportunity for Burlington. More and more boomers are staying in their cities. They're aging in place. They're predisposed to be in downtown markets. Next slide, please. Gen X are those who are 35 to 50. And what I do see among council is what I'm seeing increasingly in cities is that more and more Gen X people are in leadership positions, are really taking the reins in different cities, are the next generation to lead us forward. Most Gen X now have families, and this is where most of the disposable income is in the economy. So Gen X is increasingly important for downtown areas as well. Next slide, please. Millennials, I'm the father of 2 millennial kids. Some of you may have kids who are in that 20 to 35 age range. Every city in the United States right now, including Burlington, are competing for millennials. This is where the growth in the economy is. This is the raw material that's powering the growth segments in the economy. And we're lucky in Burlington because we have an endless engine of millennial talent coming out of the universities and the community colleges that we have here. We'll talk a little bit more about millennials in a minute, but they are reshaping society. They're more optimistic, tolerant, and multicultural than previous generations. Next slide, please. The fourth generation, this is our latest trend report, Gen Z, those who are 20 or younger. And the big question is that a lot of us have a lot of understanding of how important millennials are in the economy, but what about Gen Z, these younger people? Are they going to continue a lot of the same patterns? And the answer is mostly yes. Certainly the predisposition to being in downtown and living in urban situations is attractive for Gen Z as well. There are some key differences. I think these will have interesting impacts on Burlington. One, they're less oriented to college. So a lot of these younger kids have seen their older brothers and sisters move back home, straddled with debt, and they're not so incentivized to go to college. But they're also highly entrepreneurial. So cities need to remain entrepreneurial, very friendly to small business, and provide environments where younger people want to be and where they want to thrive. Next. So the second demographic trend that we looked at is education, talent, and jobs. Whoa, hello. Can we stay in this slide just for a moment? I know we're strapped for time. I appreciate the prodding on the slide. The third bullet on the slide is probably the most important. It just shows you why millennials are so darn important and why cities are competing for them. Today, they're 40% of the American workforce. By 2020, they could be half of the workforce. Some projections say they could be as much as 3/4 of the workforce by 2025. This is as boomers start to exit the workforce. So a lot of what follows in this presentation is how can Burlington, how can downtown in particular, be that magnet that's attractive to this younger demographic that we need for the economy. Next slide, please. The third trend, this is new, this came out of our latest trend report, and this is a huge opportunity for Burlington, rise of the mid-tier city. What's happening is a lot of younger people are moving to what are called superstar cities, the Bostons, the New Yorks, arguably a place like my hometown, Denver. And after 4 or 5 years, they're getting fatigued with the experience in these cities, the costs, the hustle and the bustle, and they're either moving back home or they're looking for smaller communities to move to. And they're attracted by a more reasonable cost of living. They're attracted by having families in communities that offer high quality of life. And also they're attractive at the opportunity to actually get involved in city building. And this is a key thing. Not only do we want younger people here, but do we have pathways for them to get involved in the city and in downtown revitalization in particular. Next slide, please. The next set of trends we look at relate to lifestyles. Next slide, please. And I will quickly go through these. Changing consumer behaviors is about retail and how retail is changing. This is critical, as you know, to downtown and certainly Church Street, which has been a retail attraction for decades. Retail's in total disruption. We know about the impact of Amazon. We know about how e-commerce is affecting retail. But the niche for cities, the niche for downtowns remains local, independent, unique concepts that can offer a different experience. Certainly Burlington has a competitive edge with downtown and with Church Street. Next. Shifts in how we get around, transportation and mobility. And the picture on the slide, that could be one of my kids, one of my millennial kids, wondering what that machine is behind him. Millennials are shifting away from cars. And in fact, today, 60% of 18-year-olds nationally have driver's licenses. That's a low. That's a 50-year low of young people actually having driver's license. So younger people, and remember that 20 to 35 age group, and also the younger ones, we're competing to bring them to Burlington. These people are looking for different ways to get around town. So whether it's bikes or it's walking or it's ride share, there are a variety of alternatives that we should think about in planning for and looking at the future of downtown in particular. Next, please. Housing and livability, also a new trend in our latest trend report. More and more downtowns like Burlington's are evolving. They're not just business centers or retail centers anymore, but they're becoming neighborhoods. So I would argue that over the next 5 to 10 years, probably the most immediate market-driven play for Burlington is more housing in downtown. And this is something that is really supported by multiple generations wanting to be down here, not just the young, but also those boomers, those people over 50, also attracted to downtown lifestyles. Next. And then the last lifestyle trend we look at is actually regionalism. When we started our trends report 10 years ago, the U.S. national debt, everyone in here accounted for about $29,000 of debt. Today, everyone in the room accounts for more than $63,000 in national debt. And what that means is that the federal government is simply broke, and that solutions to infrastructure, innovation, education, solutions are going to be local and regional. And that's really what the message is here. Those cities and those regions that invest in themselves are going to have more opportunity to be competitive moving forward. And downtown actually becomes a voice in all of that, working with the rest of the community to advance regional investment. Next slide. Last set of slides, and I'll try to stay true to that 10-ish minute guarantee. Competition next. We're not only looking at trends in the United States, we're also looking at what's going on the other side of the planet and how it affects us. This slide looks at the world's 3 largest economies over a 200-year period, and what's fascinating to me is if you go back to 1850 and if you look ahead to 2050, it's the same players. So China and India, the largest players on the planet in terms of economy. Next slide, please. So the consumption on the other side of the planet in places like China and India, it impacts our lives in Burlington. And what it means is that prices for commodities that we rely on for growth and new development, things like concrete, steel, petroleum, prices will continue to be high because of what's going on the other side of the planet. That means existing infrastructure makes sense to reinvest in existing infrastructure. So downtown business districts become a competitive advantage moving forward. Next slide, please. 9th trend that we look at is what's next in technology. It's actually these devices that we carry in our pocket, these smartphones that have influenced the design of buildings and cities most, interestingly, over the last 10 years. By 2020, there will be 9 billion mobile connections on the planet. That means we do a better job getting smartphone technology in people's pockets around the world than we do feeding people. The way it's influenced design is office design is more about social space, less about individual space. We're seeing that in housing design. We also see that in a downtown area. So the importance of a space like the park behind this building in terms of a community gathering space and a place that's inviting becomes more and more important over time. Next one. The last trend we've looked at, it started as sustainability when we were doing this 10 years ago. There's 3 pillars to sustainability: economic, environmental, and social equity. In these days, we're really talking more and more in cities about the notion of social equity. I know this is front and center in Burlington, and particularly with this body. And the message here is the city and the downtown, is it a place that provides opportunity for the full spectrum of the community? Are we providing opportunities not just for high-end housing, but are we providing affordable price points as well? Are we providing education opportunities for the full spectrum of folks in the community? So I sort of leave you with that thought on social equity. The last slide, which is the next slide, which doesn't have to be the last slide if you want to keep going, but conclusions. The conclusions of all this trend analysis, and again, we'll make the slides and we'll make the publication available to you. There are 250 different sources that go into our trends exercise. But the bottom line is this, is that these trends are very favorable for vibrant downtowns, for downtowns that have a sense of vitality. And we summarize this into 6 big conclusions. One, the demographics are really in the favor of downtowns and urban areas. So we're growing older, boomers, and younger, millennials and Gen Z at the same time. These generations are predisposed to being and wanting to be in downtown areas. Secondly, increasingly connected and competitive world. That gets into what's going on the other side of the globe. And if we can promote entrepreneurship, if we can partner with institutions like the university and even the hospital to create jobs in downtown, we've got a competitive advantage. Be an opportunity city. That's what that third bullet is, and really take advantage of this reverse migration from the big, expensive cities to people who are looking to resettle into smaller, more affordable cities. Global growth, making investment in existing infrastructure more attractive. Fifth, innovation and investment more reliant on regions. Are we investing as a city in a region? Are we not relying so much on the federal government moving forward? And then lastly, planning for economic and cultural diversity. So the bottom line of this whole presentation is really never in our lifetimes have all these trends converged to support areas like downtown and like downtown Burlington. And to tie this up in a tidy little bow, back to what Kelly was talking about, that relates back to our project, looking at the best model of how we manage, maintain, and market downtown Burlington, and how your existing improvement districts should best be configured moving forward. So I know that's a lot to digest.
So thank you, Mr. Segal. So we're going to take a pause there, and
Okay.
we need to move back in. We'll bring you back up.
Okay.
If there are questions, if you have any